What's up, everyone? It's Brian Horning here with Exact IT Solutions. I have my co-host, Reginald Andre, down in Miami, Florida from Arc Solvers. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well. Yourself?
I'm doing well. Welcome to episode 23 of Security Squawk podcast, where we talk about the business side of cybersecurity so we can help you, your employees, and just anybody out there get smarter about the things that are going on around cybersecurity. And if you've been living, unless you've been living under a rock, you know that things are heating up in that world with cybersecurity. I'm sure you know about the Colonial pipeline hack. It was pretty much on every news channel for at least 2 or 3 days. And it probably has gotten the most coverage out of anything, because why? Because it affected something that Americans are in love with, which is gasoline, cars, and oil, right? So today we're going to dive into a little bit about the kind of the after effects of what's come out from the Colonial pipeline attack. And that is our trusty friends over in the government, our president and other elected officials, congressmen, senators, mostly congressmen. I haven't heard too much about senators around this kind of stuff, are moving towards actually attempting to do something about cybersecurity and maybe try to make things a little bit better. So we're going to dive into an article that we found that highlights some of the things that the Biden administration has put out there. But before we do, Andre, do we get paid for this podcast?
No, we don't.
And how do we promote this podcast?
We just ask to simply like, share, and comment.
So like, share, and subscribe. We are over on YouTube. We also broadcast this live onto Facebook. But more importantly, if you're listening to us as a podcast, which we hope you are, and you're downloading us on iTunes, on Google Podcasts, we're on Audible, we're on Spotify, we're pretty much anywhere where you can download a podcast. First off, we thank you for listening to us during your car ride, during your exercise, your workout, your walk, whatever you're doing right now while you're listening to us. If you could take 15 to 30 seconds of your life and just head over to that platform, give us 5 stars, and maybe drop a comment to give other people context as to why they should listen to this channel. Andre and I make a really hard effort to not talk about tech stuff on this channel and try to make it relatable to the average everyday person. Whether you own a business or you work in a business, this affects you, and we try to break it down for you so you understand how you could be a victim of one of these cyber criminals and what you can do to help prevent your company or even yourself being hit with things like ransomware, right? So, Andre, what's ransomware in case people don't know? I still meet people who are like I mentioned ransomware, and I think everybody knows what ransomware is, but they're like, what the hell is ransomware? So what's ransomware?
So ransomware, in the simplest forms, is when your computer, you try to open up a program, you try to open up a Word document, Excel spreadsheet, whatever the case is. And when you open it up, it's going to X's and O's, and more than likely it's going to have something that says read me. And when you open it, it's going to tell you that we have locked all of your files. You cannot access it. And if you don't pay us within, first you have to pay us. And if you don't pay us within a certain amount of time, you'll never get your data back. And we'll also publish it out in the dark web.
Nice. Not nice, but
right.
That was a nice description of it. I guess the other thing too is not only does it lock your files, but a lot of times your programs that need to run on your systems need certain files to make it work, right?
Right.
And it's possible that the ransomware could encrypt those like supporting files, which ultimately means your programs won't run, right? They won't start up. I've even seen ransomware where the executable file that runs programs gets garbled, and it doesn't know how to properly execute the program. So I've seen that too. So it's not just data, it can also be software. But at the end of the day, it hampers your business. It puts you at a standstill for doing business and conducting business. That's why you see all these crazy payouts, millions or tens of millions of dollars to get things back up and running. And I guess we should mention double extortion too, because people are, might think, well, I have backups, or, I don't really care if, I get ransomware. I don't really have anything that important. What's double extortion? Just quickly educate our audience on what double extortion is when it comes to ransomware.
Yeah, so they're essentially trying to get the money from you, the person who had the data, and then they're also trying to also get paid from the end user who doesn't want their data out in the public.
Yeah, and they also steal it. So that's the other important thing is like they take the data right from your system. So they take it first, then they encrypt it, and a lot of times people think, well, I'm not going to pay these guys. But then they'll use that data or something within that data to extort, they'll use that information to extort you. So fun things. But if you don't know what ransomware is, you don't know what double extortion is, that's what it is. So let's just jump right into it. I'll pull up an article that we found on the screen here, and we'll jump into talking about what the Biden administration has proposed for strengthening U.S. cybersecurity. So this is one that it's on one of our favorite websites, MSSP Alert, and it's billions of dollars would be allocated to upgrade the nation's cybersecurity defenses and modernize networks should President Biden's $2 trillion infrastructure proposal to secure the nation's critical systems gain congressional approval. The American Jobs Plan, as the White House has named the measure, would see funding directed to improve energy infrastructure at the state and local levels, to secure the power grid, improve cyber defenses, update technology, expand broadband, and other advances. Now, I knew about the American Jobs Plan before the Colonial pipeline attack, right? So it seems to me that this is maybe a little skewed in terms of its reporting, right? Because it says $2 trillion, right? But that's mixed in with a whole lot of other things.
Right.
Right. So, because I believe he ran on infrastructure, right? That he was going to build infrastructure or help with infrastructure. That was one of the big things he was going to use to improve the economy.
Right.
So how do you feel about the cybersecurity improvement plan being kind of mixed in with the American Jobs Plan?
Well, I think what's going to happen is, especially with these type of big bills, is you obviously have different sites and everybody's going to want to put in something for their state or for their community. And right. I think it's just going to make this go longer. There should have just been something like, guys, we have a huge cybersecurity issue. American Jobs Act is one thing, but we have a cybersecurity act that we need to form and we need to just push through and get it done. Because I think this is just going to take, the Senate, the Congress, and all of this politics is going to be in there. And at the end of the day, it's going to just prolong everything.
Right, because these are known as pork bills, right? And pork is essentially what you take home to your constituents, right? Right. So every congressperson is going to be angling to get their constituents or their district, money for this, and it's going to come in the form of like, a handout. It's going to come in the form of like, well, hey, we have this military base or, this, oil refinery or this electrical producing entity, whether it's, gas, nuclear, solar. And there's going to be a lot of fighting over $2 trillion. And at the end of the day, in this country, in today's day and age, $2 trillion doesn't really get you very far. So I would kind of be for a separate plan, like you mentioned, that doesn't include this being packaged in with a lot of other really expensive things. Maybe as we move down in here, it'll kind of say how much is actually going to be put out there. But at first look, I don't like the idea that they're packaging this up with the American Jobs Plan, because I also know that because this is a Biden initiative, it's going to meet resistance from the other side. And my fear is that nothing gets done. Right? Yep. That they don't, they like you said, the politics comes into play, but not only the politics of like dividing the money up between the districts, but the politics of, we don't want this president to get this win under his belt. Like we know that that's a thing in this country. So, I think on our last podcast recording, I kind of drew a comparison to something like this and gun control, like when we talk about gun control in this country, and the things that when people come out of the woodwork and say we need to do something right after usually a mass shooting, and then really nothing gets done. I mean, I don't know. I think the last one, and I don't want to go too deep into this, but I think the last one was the shooting in Florida, if I'm not mistaken, like the last big one that caused a major national uproar. Am I off on that, or is my memory serving me correct?
No, you're right.
Right. And then I remember like the parents and the kids that went to school there, they got a platform for a few weeks to kind of rally up people and get people behind their cause. And I really don't hear from those people too much anymore. And I don't think anything's been done at the national level or in Florida as a result of that. Am I off on that either?
Yeah, there's some people got fired, but other than that, yeah, it's
nothing changed law wise with guns in Florida, exactly, or anything like that, right? So I just think that this is going to kind of end up in the same bucket, that once everybody forgets about Colonial, nobody really ran out of gas until somebody's power goes out again, or they can't get gas, or their vacations are threatened by some kind of cyber attack. And the crazy thing is like, to me, is like SolarWinds from an impact level was a bigger hack than the Colonial, in hindsight, right? Mm-hmm. But there wasn't nearly the coverage around SolarWinds that the Colonial pipeline got. Like, to me, the Colonial pipeline just got a ton of press, and like I saw cybersecurity being talked about on channels that I never saw it talked about on before. And the SolarWinds didn't get that kind of cash, right? The SolarWinds hack got some news, some press, but where you might get a few days with the Colonial pipeline on, say, like the national ABC 6 o'clock news or NBC 6 o'clock news. The SolarWinds one maybe got like 1 day for like 30 seconds, right? Mm-hmm. It was like a quick, like, here's what happened, blah, 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 boom, boom, boom. And then it was over. Now, if you follow the SolarWinds stuff, you're actually finding out more today than we knew back then, right? They just came out and said with SolarWinds that they were in the systems a lot longer than initially thought before, right? They thought they were in there for, back in the spring of 2020, and then they thought it was early 2020, maybe 2019, and now they're back to January 2019 is when they believe at this point the initial breach happened. So we're talking over a year that these cyber criminal actors were in the SolarWinds network planning, to put these backdoors into SolarWinds software.
Yeah.
And we're also finding out that it wasn't an intern who left a bad password on GitHub. It was, they got in a different way, and it wasn't because it was SolarWinds 123 was the password. And I think a lot of people believe that. So I'm here to correct the record. So cybersecurity is a core part of resilience and building infrastructure of the future. And the American Jobs Plan will allocate opportunities and resources to bolster cyber defenses. The White House said in a fact sheet outlining the proposal's basic elements, the Jobs Plan summary draft follows the President's executive order on cybersecurity of May 12th, 2021. So here we go. Administration officials told Bloomberg that the Jobs Plan is part of a larger initiative to bring cyber issues to the forefront at the federal level. While the administration did not disclose how much money in total would be directed at cybersecurity in the infrastructure bill, here's what's known about the proposal at this point. $20 billion investment in Department of Energy block grants at the state and local and tribal government levels to support critical infrastructure. The modernization blocks would be tied to installing cybersecurity technology. So what does that mean to you?
Hey, they're going to be uninstalling TeamViewer and using some real stuff, right?
Well, that's funny. Why do you say that? Let's go back to why do you say that?
Yeah, because we, although this is talking about energy, but we know up in Tampa, Florida, we had a water facility, and the way their employees were remoting into the systems was with a commercial product called TeamViewer, which in itself is a legit program, but the way you manage a water facility remotely is not with a program with TeamViewer. There has to be much better security put in place, and there's just better ways of doing it. So hopefully with this investment, cybersecurity professionals and contractors will be able to come in and essentially take all of that out and put better plans in place for them.
Right. And the energy system in this country is still, for the most part, privately run. So the states would be the ones who, and the state and local governments would be the ones to best determine how this money is allocated and spent. I don't know if I disagree with that. I also just don't have a warm and fuzzy when I hear it's got to go from federal to state to local. I just know how the government works, and I don't trust it. So I just see a lot of waste, happening if it can't come direct, if it can't go direct from the federal government to the people that need it. Hopefully that's how it is. I do like the way that they handled PPP and IDLE. And I think that this could be handled in a similar way, where it gets the federal government uses the states and local governments to identify people of need, but they are the ones who actually distribute the funds to direct to the end user. But yes, we do have to shore up cybersecurity at the Department of Energy level to make sure our energy grid, our power, our fuel sources don't get affected by cyber criminals. So moving to the next point, which is $100 billion broadband investment to promote network security. Grant recipients would be asked to source from trusted vendors and implement cybersecurity that maps to Biden's executive order. So here's my issue. I like how they say trusted vendors. Big shout out to SSP Alert for kind of presenting it this way, right? Because who really is a trusted vendor? Who's to say that this vendor is somebody that we can trust, that we know that they build their hardware and software properly, or that it's been vetted enough that we know that the chances of them having some kind of exploitable vulnerability in their product is very minimal. That to me is what a trusted vendor would qualify as. But who's to say that? Who has the expertise to evaluate that, and who's to say that that is what they're talking about here? Does trusted vendor mean whoever the government likes because they donate to their political fund? There's a lot of questions that I ask here based on trusted vendors, because I'm going to break it to you right now. A lot of the most popular, trusted companies that are out there are constantly putting out products to every single day that have vulnerabilities in them that can be exploited, right? So, I'm not saying that this is true, but let's just use a name like Cisco, right? Cisco could be considered a trusted vendor, yet we know that Cisco has products that are constantly being released, usually updated at some point, but they release products that they know have vulnerabilities in them. And they've either made a determination that vulnerability is not bad enough for them to do anything about, or they're just going to put out an advisory letting people know that this vulnerability exists and we're really not going to do anything about it. It's on you to configure your network in a certain way so this vulnerability can't be exploited.
Yeah.
So what's your take on, $100 billion investment to promote network security?
There's two words here. And I'm going to say the words is investment, and then the other word when you said is on you. So and for me, that the way I'm reading this is the government is going to throw a lot of money, but what standards? And I understand that there's not one size that can fit all, because you can't, it just doesn't work that way. But is the government going to say, when we give you this money, these are the minimum standards, and the minimum standards are going to be like super high up here of things that you have to do, or are they just throwing money to just think that they're solving a problem? Another thing, as we said, trusted vendor and on you. So going to, on the smaller phases, the people that's actually going to be implementing this, our industry is not regulated. Anybody can just go on Sunbiz, which is the Florida Department to do state licenses, pay $150, say I'm a computer repair IT expert and I have a business, then print out business cards. And I think that is gonna come up so much. It's kind of like when they started to do the new version of the like the food stamp program, and then all of a sudden you had waves of people that was feeding kids during the summer, and then there was so much fraud because the government was basically paying per student, but then what was turning out was that the students weren't even coming to get the food, and they were throwing out the food and things like that, and all they was just trying to do was get the government money. So I can also see this where we're going to have a lot of new quote unquote competitors coming after that $100 billion that's being spent out there, or whatever the dollar amount is.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the competitors so much that I'm worried about the really big companies who just give a lot of money to politicians.
Yeah,
winning these grants, right? So I'm a big proponent, and I've mentioned this to you, of instituting a everybody's familiar with UL or UL listed, right? That means a product that basically uses electricity that you plug in a wall, has been vetted by UL, and they put their stamp on it or their seal of approval that this meets the standards set forth within the electronics and consumer products industry, right? So it means when you plug this device into the wall, it's not going to catch your house on fire. It's not going to blow up. It meets the standards that it's met. And I believe that we need to have something similar in the United States where somebody vets these products that these vendors are putting out to make sure that it meets some level of security, so that when people go to the store and buy things, I believe that there's an implied, thought process that people are buying good products that are not going to cause them to get hacked, right? Mm-hmm. And that's not the case. Like Andre and I are here to tell you that when you buy these products that connect to your network at home, whether it be cameras, smart light bulbs, smart everything, they make smart blinds and shades now, right? They make smart, what else do they make smart of? I don't know, TVs. They make smart refrigerators. They make smart washing machines. All this stuff has to be connected to your Wi-Fi or your network. And these are all things that can eventually be hacked, right? So mm-hmm. like one of the big things that I hate about televisions is they build them, with all these smart apps in them, they put them out to market, and within less than 2 years, they stop supporting any updates or anything like that on these devices. So like I bought a Samsung TV 2 years ago, mm-hmm. and I bought it 4 years ago. And about 2 years ago, Samsung stopped updating the TV altogether. Like I haven't gotten updates to it. If I go to the menu and try to update it, it says your TV's running the latest firmware, and the date on that firmware is 2019.
Wow.
Right. So that they stopped. Like people get mad at me when I call them up and I say, hey, Microsoft, your operating system's end of life. You have to replace your computer, your server, or the hardware, the computer you bought 5 years ago is no longer supported by the manufacturer. You have to buy a new computer. And people get mad at me because of that. If they knew that their TVs that they're buying, that they're spending $1,500, $2,000, $2,500, $3,000 on, you buy a brand new top of the line, 65, 75, 85 inch TV today, you're paying $3,000 or more, and mm-hmm. they're going to stop maintaining that TV in a year. And that's the reality. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of like, we need to have some kind of overseeing body like UL does for electricity and consumer products, and make sure that these bodies are saying, okay, yeah, this vendor puts out quality products that meet our standards, and they continue to update their products through the end of life. And when they stop updating them, there should be some kind of bulletin or some kind of notice that goes out to the owner saying, basically, your TV is never going to be updated again. Mm-hmm. And that's where we need to get to with this stuff, because people think that the stuff that they buy in the store, they can just go buy, connect it to their network, and they never have to worry about it again. And that's not the case. They have to update these devices on a regular basis, or hackers are going to start taking advantage of this.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that?
No, I just hope, as we're talking about this, that someone has common sense and says we gotta press on the cybersecurity separate. But I just unfortunately don't see it.
And then it's going to go on tax credits as an incentive to reward the build out of at least 20 gigawatt high voltage capacity power lines that will encourage stronger cybersecurity capabilities. Huh? What? Say what? The tax credit is drawn up to help finance cyber technologies for the electric grid.
The electric grid that's private, right? Or
what the hell does 20 gigawatts of high voltage capacity power lines have anything to do with cybersecurity capabilities?
Don't know.
I don't know either, but I'm going to have to look into that one. One of the things, and I'm just going to be a little cynical here, one of the things that I get concerned about when I see legislation, Joe Biden, love him or hate him, knows nothing about cybersecurity.
Right.
Right? And most Congress people know nothing about cybersecurity, right? Mm-hmm. But the Colonial pipeline hack happens, and I don't know how many days it was after the Colonial pipeline hack. Let's say it was a week. I don't even think it was that long. But like You're telling me Joe Biden, who knows nothing about cybersecurity, probably doesn't even know how to turn on a computer, it was able to have on the ready an EO for cybersecurity right after the Colonial pipeline hack?
Right.
Do you find that kind of funny?
Yeah,
Well, that's because the people who donate to political parties and the people who have interest or the people who see free money on the table are the ones who write this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Biden didn't sit there and write a cybersecurity executive order.
Right.
Somebody else wrote that for him, gave it to him or his staff, and they said, oh, this sounds good. This is what we're going to roll with. And that's literally how it goes down. And it's not just this administration. This happens in every single administration. And the tax credits thing here, this just reeks to me of something that was created by the power companies to get more of this bill favored towards them than anybody else.
Yep.
So good. I'm glad we agree on that. But yeah, I mean, that I don't understand what the build out of at least 20 gigawatts of high voltage capacity power lines means. I guess it means like if it's that big, it can't be knocked offline as easily. Maybe if it's lower, it can be knocked offline easier. I don't know. I'm definitely going to look into that, and maybe I'll update us on our next podcast recording, because I know nothing about that, but this line seems a little odd to me. And again, $2 billion to support microgrids and distributed energy infrastructure for grid resilience in areas with high risk of power outages, critical infrastructure, and frontline communities. The funding is contingent on meeting certain cybersecurity requirements. I don't know. This kind of backs up what I just said. It sounds like this was written by people who are very involved in the power companies.
Yeah.
So I'm getting more and more cynical and disheartened by this as I read it, because to me, this isn't a very well thought out cybersecurity plan. This is like, well, we know that these power companies don't do a good job of cybersecurity, so let's just give them a bunch of money.
Mm-hmm.
And, hopefully they'll do the right thing with it. Biden's infrastructure plan is an addition to the $1 billion allocated to modernize technology and upgrade security in the federal government network contained in the recently passed $1.9 trillion COVID stimulus measure. Some $650 million to support the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency is included in the legislation. More than $2 billion in discretionary funding to CISA is a line item in the president's fiscal year 2022 proposed budget request. That's just a lot of speak for. We already gave CISA money in the COVID-19 bill. It also was on the heels of the SolarWinds attack. And again, very reactionary, in my opinion. Hopefully we can start doing things that are a little bit more on the proactive side. And then it goes on to say the $1.52 trillion budget outline, which in actuality serves only as a White House wish list, includes $52 billion for the Department of Homeland Security, CISA's umbrella agency. And the CISA discretionary request amounts to $110 million increase from the 2021 enacted level. Cybersecurity takes a backseat in President Biden's proposed $2.25 trillion infrastructure package, which is unlikely to garner bipartisan support, with no money allocated to defend the country from cyber attacks on critical infrastructure targets. And I guess that's my point, right? That's where I was going with this. I mentioned it's going to be really hard to get bipartisan support for a bill like this when cybersecurity is wrapped in infrastructure. And we already know that infrastructure is something that both sides do not see eye to eye on, and how you go about doing it and how you go about paying for it. And the last line is key to me. No money allocated to defend our country from cyber attacks on critical infrastructure targets. This only talks about the energy grid, right? And specifically to me, I see just electric. like the power grid. We're not talking about other resources that this country needs to run in here. At least I'm not seeing it. Anything you want to add to that? Because I mean, that to me, that's where the money needs to go. The money needs to go to figuring out how we can better secure everything that we have going on in this country.
Yeah, it's totally unacceptable. And this is why you, the business leader and the business owner listening to this podcast and videocast, cannot wait for the government to give you a solution. And you have to protect your business, because they sure enough are not thinking about you or caring about you to make sure that your infrastructure is protected.
That's right. That's right. And you know what? The army of people who, and I'm just going to, go to bat for my industry here. This isn't going to be solved by the government. There's not enough people in the government, and the people who have the talent to do this stuff don't want to work for the government. Right? Mm-hmm. So it's going to start with the businesses taking care of their own stuff. But the people who are fighting the front lines of this war are the IT people, IT companies, managed service providers of the world. We're the ones that have the most experience with this stuff. We're the ones who are battling this in private businesses every single day, and probably have way more experience with it than most anybody who's talking about this at the level of the federal government. And I'm talking about people who work at CISA, who somehow built a reputation in 5 years, because this has only been a thing for about 5 years, of being a cybersecurity expert or being some kind of security expert. I'd love to know what they've done in real life, in the real world, that gives them these credentials. A lot of these people are just trained, or they have a degree or something like that. They have no real world experience defending networks, getting people out of ransomware situations, dealing with cyber criminals, and negotiating ransomware payments. There's very few people in the world that have that kind of experience, right? These are the people that you need to be talking to, President Biden, to figure this stuff out. Not the people who give you money, not the people who are responsible for the power grid and see free money coming their way, so they're helping you write legislation and executive orders to make these things happen for them. Of course, these companies want a handout, but that's not why we should be doing this. And if we're doing this just to make other people happy because they've given to your campaign, or that they just were the ones who took work off your plate by writing a bill or an executive order, we're doing it for all the wrong reasons. And I'm just getting a little annoyed at seeing all these different things being put out, and then you read between the lines, or you really start to dig deep in what they mean, and they really don't solve the problem of defending the country from cyber attacks. And that's all I'm going to say. So you got anything else you're going to add?
No, not to this. I did put another link on the private chat about another article that I saw.
The last one?
Yeah.
All right. So let me fire this up. I just want to stop my share because I have other things on my screen that I don't want to broadcast to the world.
Sure.
Give me 1 second. So go ahead, start talking about it, because I'll bring it up here in a second.
Sure, because earlier in our conversation, you were talking about double extortion. And, and now we're seeing that there's a lawsuit and I don't know how legit it's going to be and how strong it's going to be, but now you're having a class action lawsuit over consumers paying extra at the gas pump because of the Colonial gas pipeline.
Right. Right. So, of course, there's always going to be ambulance chasers and any kind of major attack like this, right? So we have a Ramon Dickerson, or Ramon, I don't know how you say that exactly, but he seeks to represent a nationwide class of consumers who allegedly paid a higher price for gasoline due to shortages caused by the ransomware attack in early May. The operators of the major petroleum artery Colonial pipeline reportedly shut down major portions of it before paying hackers $4.4 million. Now, Dickerson, a resident of North Carolina, says he was forced to pay an exorbitant price of gasoline during the attack. Allegedly, between 45 and 68% of gas stations in affected areas reported outages during the shutdown. Dickerson claims that he and other consumers were victims of Colonial Pipeline's failure to secure itself from hackers. I don't know. I'll let you kind of give your 2 cents first, and then I'll tell you what I think.
I definitely agree that it's an ambulance chaser, but it's just to point out that, okay, so let's forget about him suing the Colonial Pipeline, but what about if you're a doctor's office and now the doctor's office patient's information is out on the web? Just imagine what can happen to your business if your data is breached and you're not taking the cybersecurity important, and now all of a sudden you have your clients, you have your vendors now trying to sue you because your information is out there. So that's kind of more the point I was trying to make of yes, he could very well be an ambulance chaser, but you could have real world scenarios where you have sensitive information of your client that's now out there, and they are understandably pissed and now going after you because you didn't take your cybersecurity seriously.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess you're right, but this is kind of a bad example for that, right? Okay. But it doesn't change the fact that because you had a cyber attack, there's going to be downstream ripple effects on your partners and vendors, right? But here's the deal. Colonial Pipeline doesn't control the price at every gas station, right? They're all independently owned and run, right? So if I want to raise my gas prices, I have the right to do that if I own a gas station. And Colonial wasn't calling these gas stations saying, you need to raise the price of gas. Mm-hmm. What really happened here is the gas companies knew that the supply was going to go down, so they started adjusting based on that, right? Because if they could make a little extra money with the gas that they currently had, knowing that they're going to run out, all they were doing was just trying to, pad their bottom line, so to speak, right? They were just trying to make sure they were going to make up for maybe the 2 or 3 days that they weren't going to sell any gas. Mm-hmm. To me, that was a private decision. But that being said, if you do have a cyber attack on your business and that affects a vendor or supplier that you work with downstream, and it causes them to be less efficient in the delivery of the product or service that they're selling or delivering to you, rightfully so, they're going to raise their price because it costs them more money to get that to you, right? So this claim, I don't know if it really is going to have any legs. Like it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, there was a supply shortage. When there's a supply shortage and demand is still there, the prices will go up. Now, if you can determine that there was a concerted effort between the gas stations to do price gouging because of it, that's a completely different story. Mm-hmm. And that would be lawsuits against the gas stations individually for collusion. Mm-hmm. Colonial Pipeline, they're not raising their prices. They didn't raise their prices because of this. So I think their complaint is valid, but who they're going after is the wrong entity, right? Because Colonial is just going to come out and say, we don't have any control over gas stations' gas prices. And the fact that our delivery mechanism was breached and we don't control whether or not the gas stations charge more or less when that happens. So that's just my kind of take on it, and I think that's where it's going to go. But your point is valid in that when you do have a cyber attack in your business, it's going to affect more than just your business. And then when that happens, you have contracts in place. You have probably service level agreements, right? That you're going to deliver certain things at a certain period of time. I'm sure Colonial Pipeline has contracts with these gas companies to say, we're going to deliver a certain amount of fuel to you by a certain date, right? Mm-hmm. That's where the lawsuit would happen, right? Between the gas companies at the distributors and Colonial Pipeline, for Colonial not being unable to deliver the gas when they promised.
Yeah.
So anything else you want to add to this? But this was a good find. I do like it. I love that people are just like, trying to figure out ways to get on the gravy train of Colonial's failure.
Right.
And quite frankly, the other thing too is like, we don't know enough about the attack, and this attorney who filed this lawsuit, he doesn't know enough about the attack to say that they failed to secure themselves to the point where there was gross negligence, right?
And one thing too is, from my understanding, Colonial, they shut it down as like a precursor to make sure it didn't spread. So,
Yeah, right. And what Andre meant there is that the computers and the operating and the systems that delivered the fuel to where they needed to go, those systems were taken offline as a precaution. Once they knew that those computers were not affected because they had the telemetry, and right there, the fact that they had the telemetry to determine that tells me that they had some level of cybersecurity in place, right? So, or maybe they just guessed, I don't know. But the operations computers were not affected, and that's how they were able to come back up. The computers that were affected, they are taking longer to come back up. I still think some of those are down, or they're still working with a cybersecurity company to get those systems back up online, the right way. So that's the big takeaway for me from this, is that we, even though that we know Colonial had this breach, those computers that were in charge of delivering the fuel and making sure the fuel gets there, take it offline as a courtesy, as a like, hey, let's just take everything offline. Let's get it all off the internet, off the networks, evaluate it. They determined they weren't breached. Let's bring them back up online. That's why it only took 6 days. If those computers were breached, they would have taken a lot longer. And my guess is we would have seen a zero on that $4 million. It would have been more like $40 million, not 4. Because when you got a company on their knees, basically in a chokehold, because they can't deliver their product until the systems are cleaned up, you're not asking for $4 million.
Yeah.
So that's it. Are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
Cool. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. We're gonna end the show today. For our this week, we had 2 shows at you, episode 22 and 23. And next week we might have a guest join us. I don't know. We'll see. So next week we'll be recording again. So look forward to episode 24. Remember to rate our podcast on your favorite podcast platform and share us out to your friends and family. You guys are doing a great job of that. We had way more downloads than we've ever had on our last episode, talking in the hundreds, and we've never had hundreds of downloads on one podcast episode since we've started doing this. So we appreciate it. Thank you. And if there's anything you would like us to talk about or go into on this channel, head over to YouTube or Facebook, type in Security Squawk podcast. We will come up. You can drop a comment into any of those posts that we have, or send us a direct message, and we will take your question or your idea and put it into one of our future shows. So thanks a lot, everyone. We'll see you on the other side. Take care.
Bye-bye.